If you've been around a television back in the early 2000s, or had just likely been born around that time, then it's likely that you've been exposed to a show by the name of Caillou. Sure enough, though, many of you out there are likely reliving the memories of said show, and probably groaning in agony just remembering how bad it truly was. For anyone who may be confused about what I'm talking about, then I'd recommend that you give it a quick Google search, and you'll quickly see the amount of hatred people have for this little 4-year-old narcissist. In fact, besides Barney the dinosaur, the show seems to have generated much more hate from parents and kids rather than just kids themselves. Oftentimes, the complaints stem more from Caillou's bratty behavior and his parents lacking in disciplining him, which really tops the show off as being one of the worst shows in existence. Follow that, and the fact that kids even imitate the things that Caillou does in real life, and you got a recipe for disaster. Even then, people have managed to come up with some rather creative ways to show their disdain for the show. Parody videos, fucked up fanfiction, go animate grounded videos, this one's the most popular out of all of them, and various rants and raves about Caillou are rather rampant online today. Sure enough, one might see these kind of things and think that the show really doesn't deserve that kind of hate, but I guarantee you that once you watch the show for yourself, especially the circus one, you'll quickly join in on wanting to throw Caillou back into the hell that he was spawned from, and then proceed to fill it with cement in the process to make sure of it that he never comes out of there again. It's actually kind of funny, though. If these people really knew about the banned episodes of Caillou, everyone would have a fucking field day just tearing apart the episodes alone. For anyone who might not know what any of these are, basically these were episodes of Caillou that were just too screwed up to air on television. One of these episodes that had been banned was an episode of Caillou winding up going down in the block of his neighborhood and getting lost due to his mother falling asleep while watching him. I'm not joking, it's actually there. To add a bit more insult to injury, Caillou pretty much has to talk with a couple of strangers who thankfully managed to get him home safely. I get it that the message was never wander off without your parents, but this episode did it in such a way that was not only a complete and utter fail of an episode, but also sent the wrong messages to children to talk to strangers and they'll take you home. There were other episodes as well, but the episode that I'm about to describe to you all was one of the worst ones that, shockingly enough, has never been aired at all. Sure enough, I know what many of you out there are likely about to ask. How in the world did I manage to watch this episode if it had never been aired to begin with? Well, to answer your questions, regardless of whether or not the episode was aired or not, the entire product itself was still animated, voice-acted, and prepared for airing, which means that the episode was certainly finished and probably stored somewhere. It was just kept from airing by various higher-ups and officials who flat-out banned the episode entirely. Secondly, I haven't actually watched the episode per se. A close friend of mine actually did. How he acquired the episode was through some rather illegal connections that he had, which I can't go through into detail due to the fact of the risk of him getting caught by police. My friend was even willing to describe to me the episode in full detail, provided that I never reveal his name or his location or pretty much anything about him to anybody in the public, which includes the thing that I'm writing now. The episode begins with the same intro and theme music for the show, as it does with every other kind of episode. Once the theme song had ended, the scene then faded in to show the grandmother, who wasn't often shown until later seasons of Caillou, making her way towards a living room and pulling out a small book. She then starts to call out to the kids, the two grandchildren, downstairs for story time. The scene would then cut to show both children making their way down the stairs as the grandmother's house and towards the couch where the grandmother was sitting at. "Come on, kids, take a seat. We got another wonderful story of Caillou today," the grandmother happily said as she patted her hand next to one of the couch cushions, gesturing the other two kids to take a seat. Once the two had finally made their way towards the couch, the boy then asked the grandmother, "So, Grandma, what are we going to be reading today?" "Well, kids, today I have another story about Caillou called Caillou's Big Day." The scene then transitioned to white before the main episode began to play. The scene begins with the main shot of the two-story blue and red house as per usual, with the title of the episode and the people who created and wrote the thing playing off as usual in the black font. The scene then cuts to show Caillou sitting in his room, ready to start the day up as he usually does. He then proceeds to walk out of his bedroom and begins walking down the hall and towards the stairs. As he's making his way down towards the kitchen, he suddenly stops when he sees that his mother isn't there as usual. Caillou looks a little bit surprised at first, but then proceeds to go and sit down in his seat, patiently awaiting for his mother to come and make him breakfast with Rosie. However, she never comes. "Mommy!" Caillou calls out. There's no response. And Caillou decides to call out a bit louder, but his mother still doesn't respond. "Where could Mommy be? She's usually in here making breakfast for everyone," Caillou says to himself. He looks around the kitchen and then waits a bit longer, but then notices that Rosie wasn't in her high chair either, which only fuels the oddness of the situation for Caillou. Caillou then proceeds to get out of his seat and then start making his way towards the living room to look for his father, Boris. He looks into the living room, but notices that his father wasn't sitting on the blue chair as he usually does during the morning reading the newspaper. It was completely empty. The TV itself was also off. Caillou then began walking to the basement where the washer and dryers were at, and then started looking around to see if he could find anyone there. Nobody was there. Not his mother, nor his father, nor Rosie. "I guess Mommy and Daddy want to get some more sleep today," Caillou begins. "I'll just make some breakfast and go and play in my room until they wake up." Caillou then makes his way out of the basement and back towards the kitchen, where he proceeds to pour himself some cereal and milk in a bowl and eat rather quickly. Once he finishes his meal and places the bowl in the sink, after washing it, he makes his way back upstairs into his room. That is, until he makes his way towards the parents' bedroom. He was tempted to open the door, but stopped himself immediately and said, "Mommy and Daddy need their sleep. It's better not to wake them up," Caillou said as he made his way back into his room. The scene then transitions over, about a few hours later in the episode, to Caillou playing with his toys, with a rather bored expression on his face. His stomach then growls again, signaling that it was time for him to eat lunch. "Hopefully Mommy and Daddy are awake now," Caillou says as he holds his grumbling stomach. Making his way back towards the kitchen like before, he noticed that nobody was there. Not at the TV, not at the stove, nothing. Just about as empty can be. Caillou then called out for both of his parents again, but he still received no answer. His face soon started to grow into a worried expression. "Gee, Mommy and Daddy sure are tired today," Caillou says to himself as he opens up the pantry again to grab a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter to make himself a peanut butter sandwich. He struggles for a little bit to open up the bread, but manages to open it up without tearing it. The same thing with the peanut butter jar. He eats as normal and puts everything back up, cleans his dishes, and then proceeds to make his way towards the bedroom once more. This time completely ignoring the parents' bedroom door. This series of events go on for a good portion of the episode until it was time for dinner. Caillou was now sitting in his bed, alone, bored, but most importantly really upset. He sniffles a bit as he makes his way back out of the bedroom and then towards the kitchen for the final time. Upon seeing the same scene with nobody there, he gets really angry and starts having a fit in the process. "Mommy! Daddy! Where are you?" Caillou cries out. No response is given, nor one is heard. It's actually a funny thing about this episode. Normally the grandmother would have been narrating over the events that Caillou had been going through, as per usual in each episode. But in this one, she doesn't speak or narrate during the portion of the episode, which only seems to make it a little bit more creepier and unnerving. Caillou then proceeds to stomp his foot down on the ground in a fit of anger as he makes his way back over towards the kitchen area and pulls a box of macaroni and cheese out of the pantry. He then places a pot of water on top of the stove and turns the burner on. He waits for a good few minutes before getting curious about how fast the water was boiling. However, while looking into the pot to see if the water was boiling, he wound up burning himself and slipping it off the stool that he was standing on, and fell, bringing the pot of boiling water down upon him. My friend told me that The screams that Caillou let out, while mixed with crying as well, was one that really managed to somehow fuck with his head when he had first watched it. Not only that, but the burns on Caillou's arms and face were rather stylized and painful looking to see. If there was ever a time that my friend had been deeply freaked out over a cartoon, it was there. He even said that while Caillou was continuously screaming in agony and pain, he was shaking like a leaf. The screaming and crying went on for a good few minutes before the scene faded in and on itself and back to show Caillou putting lotion on his wounds in the bathroom, crying and sniffling in the process as he did such. How the hell he managed to live through that, even by cartoon standards, was impressive, yet at the same time unknown. It's then at this point that Caillou makes his way over towards his parents' door, completely and utterly fed up with everything, and begins whimpering. Mommy, Daddy, I hurt myself, Caillou cried. No response as usual. Caillou, now in a fit of rage, grabbed at the door handle with the hand that wasn't burned too badly, and then proceeded to swing it open in a violent way. The scene then cuts to show Caillou's face, who now had a look of deep shock plastered upon it, before cutting to the inside of the bedroom itself. Empty. It was all empty. No parents, no furniture, no clothes, no bed. Nothing at all was left there. It was as if Caillou's parents had just packed up their things and everything else in it and moved out. Caillou, now freaking out more than ever, ran into Rosie's room and opened it, only to be greeted with the same thing. No furniture, and no Rosie. Caillou began to cry, and then began making his way downstairs rather quickly, only to find nothing else there as well. The living room was barren and empty. The kitchen as well was empty as well. Everything was gone, even inside the pantry and refrigerator. Caillou then ran to where the phone was at, which, shockingly enough, it was still there. However, when he went to call up his grandmother and grandfather, there was no sound coming out of it. No dial tone, no voices, nothing. At this point, the young child made his way back up into his room, only to discover, as with everything else in the house, everything was gone from there as well. Caillou started to cry. He fell down onto the floor into a fetal position and rocked back and forth. As he cried, the house slowly started to peel away and rot as if on fast forward in decay. Caillou simply doesn't exactly notice this and continues to sob. That is, until there was a knocking sound that came from his bedroom door. He slowly gets up, wipes away his tears, and begins walking towards the door before opening it up and seeing the back of his parents. Mommy? Daddy? Caillou says worriedly. Oh, Caillou, it's okay, we're both here, Doris replied before the two of them immediately turned around rather quickly, revealing a horrifying sight. Their faces looked wrong. In fact, wrong would be a bit of an understatement. It was fucked. Their faces looked as though they had been erased by some kind of an eraser and crudely drawn back on in Microsoft Paint, but bigger, more uneven, and just downright crooked. Caillou then screamed and then began backing away in fear. What's the matter, Caillou? Doris asked. Don't you want a hug from Mommy? It was then that Doris's voice became deeper and creepier as she said each word. Then the two parents began to twist and move into different and unnatural shapes that looked rather disturbing. This went on for nearly the rest of the episode before Caillou woke up in his bed screaming while his parents barged into his room and tried to calm him down. The rest of the episode involved Caillou's parents reassuring him that they were fine and that they were here and that everything was okay and that it was all a bad dream, before the episode ended and went to the credits just like that. Surely enough, I understood greatly what this episode was most likely had been banned from airing at the time. Not only did it manage to cover a particularly dark topic like child abandonment and nightmares, but with the fucked up visuals and the like near the end of the episode, along with the screaming and the burns as well from the boiling water, that would have been a traumatic event for any kind of child to watch. Hell, even a few adults would likely have shat their pants after watching the whole thing. That was pretty much everything that my friend had described to me. I didn't bother asking him if I could watch the video, seeing as how screwed up it was just from the description alone that he gave me. Yeah. Definitely not gonna bother watching that episode anytime soon. But still, it does leave me with one question. What kind of drugs were these producers and writers thinking when they were making this episode? Perhaps it's probably just for the best that nobody really knows about what had happened.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.